Welcome to this painting tutorial. How's it going, everyone? Welcome to this video. In this video I will be painting one of the Gamma Zhul 881 Skitarii Rangers for the Kill Team box set. This is a fairly simple, easy to paint and cool looking black and red color scheme. You only have to be careful because it has small areas of detail that you don't want to miss. Because of that, most of the areas you can get away with just using a small layer brush to paint them, except for the robe. But once you get all of the base coat laid out, it's easy to highlight and finish. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let's get started. I'm going to start by priming the model in black. For that, I'm going to use Vallejo's Surface Primer Black through an airbrush. You can use any other primer that you like. I would recommend you using black. And the first color that I'm going to use is Mechanicus Standard Gray. This is going to be the paint to paint the pants, and pretty much that's it. If you make any mistakes, you can clean up the blacks with just a little bit more of this primer in the palette and with a brush. If not, you're going to need to use a black that you're going to use on the robe just to re-establish a black that is going to be identical to your color paint, so it doesn't look weird when you try to clean up with a different black your black undercoat. Like always, make sure to thin down the colors that we're going to use in this tutorial just to not obscure detail and apply the paint as smooth as possible. Next, I decided to paint the silvers. For that, I'm going to use Leadbelcher, and this is going to go over all of the mechanical parts, all of the tubes, all of the cybernetic implants and stuff like that. Just try to paint these with this color. I tried to paint this color first because I wanted to get done with the face because it's in a very obscured part, and I started painting the arms and the legs and any other detail that I want to be silver. This paint covers very well over black, so that won't be a problem. Just make sure to thin it down because this one becomes tacky fast, and it's easy to apply it thickly over a model. Just make sure it's thinned down and it's flowing well into the crevices, and that's it. Once it's done, I'm going to move on to paint the red. For that, I use Khorne red, and with this color I'm going to paint all of the armor pieces, and the purity seal also I painted with this color. And if you have any details on the backpack that you want to be red, you can use this color as well. The trouble here can be just getting behind the gun. For me, it's not that big of a deal. You can just reach in and paint with the fine detail brush. If you're not able to paint those areas very well, it won't matter that much, and as long as you get a good base coat and a wash, nobody's going to be able to see that area. If you want it to be easier, you can leave the arms out and assemble them at the end. Once that's done, I'm going to use Rhinox hide, and with this color I'm going to paint all of the wood areas around the gun and all of the dark leather parts, which is leather straps that are mainly in the backpack and around the model. If you find anything that you want to be leather, you can paint it with this color. And the gun is just most of the body of the gun with some silver and gold details. If your model has parchment paper like mine, you can use sandry dust to paint those. This is just a very simple step. Just base coat them with this color, and that's it. Once that's done, I'm going to paint some of the tubes and glowy details with Steagadon Scale Green as a base coat. These are going to end up looking a very bright blue-green that looks very good, and it's a very good contrast to the color scheme overall. So just try to pick up some of the details that you want to be this color, such as the eyes and some of the tubes and any other glowing lights you can paint with this color. Once that's done, I'm going to use Retributor armor, and with this color I'm going to start painting all of the gold details around the model. Make sure to use a very thin brush. I'm using a small layer brush for almost everything. It has a nice point, and I'm going to try to pick up these areas that are mainly on the gun, the chest piece, and the respirator, and bits like that. Decorative parts around the model that are going to be gold. Make sure to shake well this paint because it separates, and thin it down at least a little bit so it flows, and be careful to paint these areas, not to paint in other stuff. Next, I'm going to use Celestra Gray, and with this color I'm going to paint the Mechanicum symbol on the chest piece of this model. It's just half and half of the cock piece and half of this skull. And if you did any mistakes and you painted on the black, you can correct those errors right now. I used the same color that I used through the airbrush, but in a palette with a brush, because you can use that primer like that. But if not, you should use your designated black color and paint all of the black areas again, just to make sure they're even and they're not different from the main primer color. After that's done, we're done with all of the base coats and the model looks completely colored. I'm going to move on to the washes or shades. For that, I'm going to start with Carroburg Crimson. And with this color, I'm going to get into all of the crevices with a small layer brush and to just wash those recesses with a small brush. You can wash the whole area, but then you'll need to go back and clean it up with the same Khorne red just to re-establish the color. If you don't want to do that, just paint into the recesses and just leave it like that. It's easier and it's less time consuming. Make sure to shake well all of your washes before you use them, and all of your paints as well, because they separate. And after that, I'm going to use Seraphim Sepia, and with this color I'm going to shade all of the gold areas and also the piece of parchment from the purity seal. And I think that's it for this model. It's just the gold and the parchment pieces. Once that's done, I'm going to move on to Nuln oil, and with this color I'm going to shade all of the silver parts, all of the blue parts, all of the brown parts, and the gray. And I think that's all the colors that we used. So that's it. Just try to apply this color all over these areas, and if you want, you can just wash the recesses, but it's going to make it look grittier and darker if you use it all around these areas, and it's fine. So just do that, and we're done with the washes. Once that's done, you can leave the model like this. This is a good tabletop standard, but I'm going to continue to highlight. For that, I'm going to use Dawnstone, and this is going to be used to highlight the grays. And for that, I'm just picking up the raised folds of the cloth and leaving the recesses on the previous color. And that's pretty much it. Just be careful not to paint in other areas that are surrounding the gray. We start here because it's easy to fix anything surrounding it before we start highlighting those areas. Once that's done, I'm going to use Administratum Gray, and it's going to be used to also highlight the pants, but in a smaller area, in the most sharpest and prominent parts of the pants. Just paint a smaller edge highlight on those very bright and sharp folds, and that's it. Once it's done, I'm going to highlight the red. For that, I'm going to use Evil Sunz Scarlet, and this is going to be just an edge highlight on all of the red. If you only use the wash on the recesses, then you don't have to clean up. If you use the wash all over the red, you might want to clean it up just so the color looks solid and even. And then you want to edge highlight the edges with this Evil Sunz Scarlet. Just pick the sharpest edges and just give them a small edge highlight like this. I'm also going to give the red an extreme highlight with Fire Dragon Bright. And this is just going to be in the corners of the reds and on the most sharpest parts, just to give it an extra highlight and make it pop a lot more. Just make sure to keep it inside the areas that we painted with Evil Sunz Scarlet, and leave a little bit of the Evil Sunz Scarlet showing behind, and just paint this color in the very extreme edges. Once that's done, I'm going to highlight the black, and for that I'm going to use Eshin Gray. And this is going to be an edge highlight around all of the sharpest corners of the robe. This is a very easy way of highlighting, and it looks very good. The black is very easy because also both sides, the inside and out of the robe, are black. So this color scheme is a lot more easier than painting the inside in one color and the outside in another, and also building up like highlights on the raised folds. It's a lot harder, so we can just get away with just an edge highlight. Once it's done, I'm going to use Dawnstone, and with this color I'm just going to give an extreme highlight on the blacks the same way that we did on the reds. just on the most prominent parts where you see more reflections of light, and then the sharpest corners, and keep it in an area smaller in the edges, just to show a little bit of the Eshin gray and the black in the back as well, and that way it'll look like a transition of color, and it'll look more natural. Just try to keep the very edges and the finest line that you can get with the brush. Once that's done, I'm going to use Stormhost Silver, and with this color I'm going to paint all of the silver parts of the model with this color. For most of the arms and legs, you just have to make it an extreme edge highlight on the very edges. And also you could bring back a little bit of the shine using Leadbelcher first on the larger areas if you want. But if you want a grittier, darker metal, you can just give an edge highlight with this color. And in the details also just try to pick up the details of the gun and places like that. Some of the metal areas that are like corrugated, like metal hoses and stuff like that, you can just keep a very little amount of paint on the brush and just kind of overbrush it so that it catches on just the texture of those areas, and that's it. Once it's done, I picked Steel Legion Drab, and with this color I'm going to paint the sharpest edges of the wood and of the leather, and this is just picking up the edge highlights as we did with the other colors, and they're not that many, so it's a pretty fast process. And lastly, on these areas I'm going to use Karak stone, and this is going to be on the sharpest edges of these areas as we did with the reds and blacks, just on the very corners and sharpest parts, and that's it. Next, because the parchment is in a very shadowy area, we don't really need to highlight it that much. I'm going to use Retributor bone, and with this color I'm going to just pick the edges and give it a small edge highlight, and that's it. Once that's done, I'm going to use Liberator gold, and with this color I'm going to paint all of the edges of the gold. Be very careful to shake this color very well because it separates a lot. And it doesn't look that different, but it's going to tone down the yellow and it's going to give it an extra highlight on those edges, making the gold look a little bit more realistic, less cartoony, a little bit less saturated. And that's it. Just try to pick up all of the gold areas, just leaving the other areas as they are. Try not to paint on those, and that's it. Next, for the blue-green, I'm going to use Sotek green, and I'm going to start building up a highlight with this blue-green colors. And I'm going to leave a little bit of the previous color behind, but try to pick most of the areas of the eyes and on the tubes and any other glowy parts of the model. This color buildup is going to pop a lot, and it's going to be a very good contrast with the red. It's going to look very good, and it's going to give extra life to this color scheme. Once it's done, I'm going to use Temple Guard blue, and I'm going to repeat the last step just in a much smaller area, the very highlights of those tubes and eyes and glowy lights and stuff like that. Just try to pick the very shiniest parts of these areas and paint them in this color, and that's going to make them pop a lot. And finally, I'm going to use a little bit of white, and with this color I'm going to pick up the highlights on the Mechanicus symbol on the chest piece of this Skitarii Ranger. And this is just picking the sharpest edges and making them pop white again because they got washed out from the wash when we used Nuln oil over all of these parts, and just try to pick those areas. And this is the finished model. This is a very fun model to paint. It's very easy to paint as well because most of the paints that we used cover very well, and it's a very dark color scheme, so it doesn't require a lot of highlighting. And yeah, it was pretty much very easy to do, and I think you're gonna have an easy time painting all of these colors. You can leave any of the highlights or colors behind if you don't want to go to this level of quality. You can just leave it with base coat and wash and call it a day. So that's it. Thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you found it entertaining and informative and helpful, and if you did, please like the video, comment on it, and subscribe to the channel to see more videos in the future. That really helps me out and it keeps me motivated to do more videos. You can also follow me on Facebook and everywhere you can find me. The links are in the description below. And that's it. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you on the next video. You stayed. Great. Thank you very much for supporting my channel, and if you would like to become a patron, there is a link to my Patreon page in the description below. Your contributions help pay for my work and keeps the channel going. A single $1 a month is more than enough, and you can cancel at any time. If you can't, don't worry, you can support my channel by simply watching my videos and sharing them with your friends. Thank you for watching, have a great day, and I'll see you on the next one.